The case of Danilo Cavalcante. On July 3, 1989, a child was born in the municipality of Estu in the state of Maranhão, Brazil. The boy was given the common Portuguese name, Danilo. This child experienced a tough upbringing. He wasn't spoon-fed or comforted with bedtime stories. No one took him by the hand to school when he reached school age. Instead, like many children in his impoverished neighborhood, he grew up on the streets. The environment for adults and children in Brazil's favelas is marked by oppressive poverty, low living standards, and high unemployment. All these factors contribute to a thriving street crime culture. When growing up in such conditions, amid dirt, poverty, and lack of basic human necessities, one's instincts for self-preservation kick in. People survive as best they can or choose to. Unfortunately, most often someone who has known only violence from childhood may take the same violent path since they know no other way. Our story today delves into the horrific brutality and relentless obsession that can destroy lives. Such events unfolded recently. In 2019, Sarah Brando eagerly awaited the arrival of her younger sister Deborah and her two nephews, Ian and Yasmin, at the airport. After a failed relationship with her children's father, Deborah, who was 30 at the time, driven by a genuine desire to provide a better life for her children, moved from Brazil to Pennsylvania to live with her sister. The family quickly adapted to their new environment, enjoying their cozy home and improved living standards. Deborah Brando and her sister Sarah were inseparable. They worked together at a cleaning service and often stayed connected via phone calls throughout the day. Their lives were quiet and happy as they embraced their newfound circumstances in another country. However, an unexpected acquaintance altered their destinies forever. In 2020, while spending a day off with her children at a park, Deborah met Danilo Cavalcante, a compatriot who was 31 years old at that time. A trusting relationship swiftly developed between them. Danilo was attentive and kind to both Deborah and her children. Deborah fell in love with her Brazilian neighbor Danilo Cavalcante and believed she had found a dependable partner. After several months into their relationship, they rented a small house together and began living as one cohesive family unit. After some time, Danilo, whose temperament was often hot and emotional, began to lose interest in the apparent perfection of their family life. As he grew closer to Deborah, his jealousy and obsession intensified. Mistrust without basis gradually transformed into a need for total control over the relationship. Frequent conflicts erupted between the couple, often culminating in violence. Danilo would drink heavily every night and return home as a completely different person, almost like an angered animal. He demanded complete submission and obedience from Deborah, punishing her severely in front of her children when she resisted. Despite her strength and efforts to defend herself and protect her children, the situation became untenable for Deborah. Unable to endure such treatment any longer, she moved back to her sister's home. After numerous threats from Danilo, Deborah sought protection by going to the police and subsequently obtaining an order of protection from the court that prohibited him from approaching her. Despite her attempts to distance herself from him, Danilo pursued her aggressively, often resorting to threats of violence if she even considered ending their relationship permanently. Fearing for her safety, Deborah decided to investigate Danilo's background. She reached out to acquaintances in Brazil through social media and unearthed startling information about his past life and his reasons for coming to the United States. To her shock, she discovered that Danilo was not who he had claimed to be. On November 5, 2017, in Brazil, Danilo had fatally wounded a 20-year-old student named Walter Jr. Moreira dos Reis by shooting him 5 times near a restaurant in Figueroa for something as trivial as a car repair debt. Investigation revealed that the two men were friends before this tragic incident occurred. Following the crime, Brazilian authorities issued an arrest warrant after granting the prosecutor's office's request for preventive detention. However, Danilo managed to leave Brazil through Brasilia International Airport due to procedural disagreements within the judicial system that delayed registering this decision in the National Warrant Registry. This discovery left Deborah stunned as she realized how much danger she was truly in by merely being associated with Danilo Cavalcante. It wasn't until 7 months after the crime that Cavalcante entered Puerto Rico illegally. In June 2018, a warrant for his arrest was issued in Brazil. Upon entering Puerto Rico, Cavalcante obtained a fake ID and eventually settled in Chester County, Pennsylvania, where his sister lived. Upon discovering Danilo's true identity, Deborah issued an ultimatum: leave her alone or she would reveal his identity. Unfortunately, this decision proved fatal. On the evening of April 18, 2021, Deborah was walking with her children outside her house. The children were playing catch-up while Deborah chatted quietly with an elderly neighbor. When Danilo Cavalcante approached and pulled Deborah aside for a conversation, the neighbor looked on but did not intervene. The discussion initially appeared calm. However, at one moment, Cavalcante produced 2 knives and attacked her. Deborah fell to the ground as he stabbed her multiple times. Despite her children's pleas for him to stop hurting their mother, he continued in a frenzy, inflicting a total of 38 stab wounds. A neighbor witnessing this brutal act attempted to administer emergency aid and stop the bleeding while Deborah's daughter ran to get help and call emergency services. Deborah Brando was rushed to a hospital but succumbed to her injuries. Meanwhile, Danilo Cavalcante fled Pennsylvania to evade capture and remained on the run for several hours until apprehended by Virginia State Police. He was extradited back to Pennsylvania and placed under arrest pending trial. On August 16, 2023, in Chester County, Danilo Cavalcante's trial for first-degree murder commenced. The investigation revealed that Cavalcante had refused to accept the end of their relationship and had been intimidating Deborah through regular domestic violence since 2020. During the trial, Deborah's sobbing child testified, repeatedly recounting the terrifying events of that day. It took the jury only 15 minutes to convict Cavalcante. He was sentenced to life imprisonment without parole. Following the verdict announcement, Cavalcante was transferred to Chester County Jail in Pocopson, where he awaited transfer to a federal prison. On August 31, 2023, around 9 a.m., an inmate managed to escape from Chester County Jail. Utilizing a chimney, he scaled the wall between 2 narrow hallways and ascended through the chimney to the roof. Avoiding the barbed wire fences, he broke free. Surveillance footage captured him in the tight space between 2 walls in the exercise yard. He used his arms and legs to ascend upward, eventually running across the roof. From there, he climbed over the fence and pushed through the barbed wire to gain freedom. Prison officials were well aware of vulnerabilities identified after Igor Balti's escape and believed they had addressed them adequately. Officials thought that adding barbed wire after a similar escape attempt by an inmate named Igor Balti just months earlier would prevent any jailbreaks. Acting Warden Howard Holland stated that according to court documents in May, inmate Igor Balti had climbed onto the roof of the jail and jumped to a less secure location, but was captured less than a mile from the prison, within about 5 minutes. In response to this urgent matter, the prison was locked down, initiating a massive search for Danilo Cavalcante, considered particularly dangerous. Alerts were issued everywhere. Danilo Cavalcante, age 33, with black hair and possibly armed and very dangerous. The escape of such a dangerous felon gained significant media attention. The search for this fugitive was broadcast daily across all media channels. The Pennsylvania State Police Chief overseeing the search held regular press conferences and briefings, providing residents with precise information about this special operation. He urged residents not to stay on the sidelines, but to take an active role through vigilance and observation to help determine the perpetrator's route. And it worked. About a few hours after the escape, Danilo Cavalcante was spotted walking along a road about 2 miles from the prison. With the help of reports from local residents, Cavalcante was seen on camera in the early morning hours of September 2nd. Police set up a search perimeter around the area, securing roads and railroads that run through it to prevent Cavalcante's potential escape, and put up a $10,000 reward for any information leading to his capture. Authorities began searching within 2 miles of the jail in the heavily wooded area of Pocopson Township in Chester County. A local resident saw the fugitive in a creek bed just days after the escape, but he fled into the woods before police could find him. The search continued and the perimeter expanded after he spent about a week on the run. A security camera captured Cavalcante at Longwood Gardens, a popular botanical garden nearly 3 miles from the jail, just south of where law enforcement initially searched for him. There are a lot of ravines, tall fields, high grass, and a lot of cover for a guy who is 5 feet tall and 120 pounds. Robert Clark, Deputy U.S. Marshal for the Eastern District of Pennsylvania, stated on September 5th that in addition to tough terrain, searchers had difficulty with extreme heat and humidity lasting for several days. After a week of desperate searches for Cavalcante, the number of officers involved grew from 250 to almost 400. The search team was strengthened not only in numbers, but also in equipment. Helicopters flying over began playing a recorded message from Cavalcante's Portuguese-speaking mother, begging him to surrender peacefully. The next morning, Cavalcante was spotted by a security camera on property located about 2 miles south of the prison. Police moved in and set up a new perimeter around this facility and Longwood, as well as nearby schools. These areas were closed while search efforts continued. Police conducted an intensive search over several days until eventually Longwood Gardens briefly reopened with limited access before being forced to evacuate and close again following another sighting of Cavalcante. On September 7th, law enforcement doubled the reward for information leading to his capture from $10,000 to $20,000. After nearly a week of searching, tension was palpable. Locals knew a man convicted of murder was on the loose. Yet, authorities had not disclosed how Cavalcante escaped from prison. In Chester County, Philadelphia residents were instructed by police to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors. CBS News reported that 34-year-old Danilo Cavalcante escaped from a Pennsylvania prison. The intense search pressed on until a significant development occurred on September 9th. Cavalcante somehow managed to breach the search perimeter in Longwood Gardens. He was seen on a video intercom, standing on the porch of a former colleague's home near Phoenixville, almost 20 miles northeast of the search area. Cavalcante cleverly altered his appearance. He shaved and donned new clothes and remained undetected as he moved across the state. He stole a van from a local dairy store and drove it to Phoenixville with hopes of getting help and shelter from acquaintances. On the morning of September 10th, authorities discovered an abandoned stolen van with an empty gas tank in a field in suburban East Nantmeal. The search area then shifted to the northern part of Chester County. Cavalcante's movements once again prompted changes to the search perimeter on September 11th. As investigators continued their efforts, Cavalcante was listed on Interpol's most wanted list, and the reward for information regarding his whereabouts was increased further. That night, emergency services received an urgent call from a local resident who reported that a man matching Cavalcante's description had broken into his garage. In self-defense, the homeowner fired multiple shots and hit him. Surprisingly, Cavalcante managed to escape and stole a .22 caliber rifle with both scope and flashlight attachments. Police arrived swiftly at the scene and discovered Cavalcante's sweatshirt and shoes nearby. Once they confirmed his identity and recognized that this dangerous felon was now armed, local authorities urged residents in South Coventry to lock all doors and windows, secure vehicles, and stay indoors whenever possible. This fugitive remains particularly dangerous, and his escape has deeply concerned area residents. Several school districts even canceled classes as precautionary measures to ensure safety. On the day after Cavalcante was seen on surveillance video, police expanded the search and urged residents to keep their doors locked. A new search perimeter was set up in South Coventry Township, which was tighter than before because authorities believed Cavalcante was now surrounded. The search continued throughout September 12th. Around 1 a.m. on September 13th, an aircraft with thermal imaging technology spotted Cavalcante in the woods. However, due to bad weather, the police had to wait until sunrise to approach, as the surveillance plane could not operate safely. The significant breakthrough occurred in the early morning hours of September 13th, when authorities found out that a security alarm went off just after midnight within the final search perimeter. According to Bivens, an officer of illicit drug enforcement, the aircraft using thermal imaging technology detected a heat signal around 1 a.m. shortly after the alarm was triggered. Ron Johnson, a retired Missouri State Highway Patrol captain, mentioned that technology played a major role in this operation. He said law enforcement faced many challenges for a long time, but managed to pick up the heat signal from a DEA spy plane just in time. At around 8 a.m. on September 13th, Police found Cavalcante asleep with the rifle he had stolen from the home 2 nights earlier. Danilo Cavalcante, a dangerous criminal, tried to escape by crawling into thick undergrowth. However, a police dog named Yoda subdued him by biting his head and holding him until police arrived. Lieutenant Colonel George Bivens stated at a news conference that Yoda caused Cavalcante minor head injuries during his capture. Cavalcante was questioned by the police immediately after his capture. He revealed that he survived on watermelons and creek water and traveled only at night. He even admitted he almost got caught by an officer while hiding at one point. His plan was to steal a car and travel to Canada. Since returning to prison, Cavalcante has been charged with multiple crimes related to his escape, including burglary, trespassing, and theft. Following his capture, local and state officials, including Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro, expressed gratitude to all law enforcement officers who assisted in the search for high-risk felon Danilo Cavalcante. Chief George Bivens, who led the search, discussed the multitude of challenges that law enforcement officers faced during the operation to locate Cavalcante. He highlighted the intense heat and thunderstorms that occurred in the area during the search. Additionally, he noted that each of the search perimeters was established in heavily wooded areas. The search team was composed of approximately 500 law enforcement officers, including Pennsylvania State Police, FBI, ATF, and U.S. Marshals, who thoroughly searched the area around the escape scene. In the wake of Cavalcante's escape, police set up a perimeter spanning several miles in each direction. The Chester County Jail Board, responsible for overseeing the jail, faced heavy criticism from local residents for their failure to prevent Cavalcante's escape. Residents pointed out that the jail had previously been given an opportunity to implement necessary security improvements after Igor Balti's attempted escape on May 19th. Those enhancements could have potentially prevented Cavalcante's escape, since he used the same method as Balti did. Following this incident, the prison has already terminated the prison guard who was on duty during Cavalcante's August 31st escape. Prison officials stated that this guard had a chance to spot Cavalcante during his breakout. In response to public concern, and days after capturing the fugitive, Chester County Jail announced they had installed a tin roof over the area where Cavalcante scaled 2 walls to access and eventually escape from the facility. Alongside this measure, various other security enhancements and improvements were also implemented. Clearly, there are questions that Chester County officials will need to address regarding how the suspect managed to escape, especially considering this prison's history, said Pennsylvania Governor Josh Shapiro. He emphasized how crucial communication and cooperation among all law enforcement agencies and local residents were during this extensive search effort. Thanks to these combined efforts, Danilo will now never go free again. Shakaya Blue Harding was born November 28, 1998 and went by the name Blue. She lived in Billings, Montana, and as a teenager, she would unfortunately suffer from mental illness and drug addiction. She was last seen at the age of 19 on the afternoon of July 23, 2018, walking along Buena Vista Road in Billings. The next day, Blue posted a series of Facebook posts expressing that she was upset about a failed relationship, amongst other things in her life. She posted her final post shortly before midnight, which reads, "All of her social media activity ceased after that, and her family hasn't seen or heard from her again." Her family reports that they had a strained relationship with her prior to her disappearance due to her erratic behavior, but her mother feels like she is still alive. In the months leading up to her disappearance, she was reportedly living on the streets of Billings. However, she always kept in touch with her family. Finally, on August 20th, 2018, her mother reported her missing after a month went by with no word from her daughter. Her sister explained that due to her sister's transient lifestyle and the fact that she had disappeared and returned before, her family did not file an official missing persons report until almost a month later, thinking she would eventually turn up. Her family feels like Blue's case has been ignored due to her drug use and the fact that it took them so long to realize she was missing. There is unfortunately very little information available in her case. Reports state that she has ties to Fort Riley, Kansas, New Mexico, and Montana, but it is unclear if she has been spotted in those areas. Her family members are concerned for her safety and are desperately seeking answers. There was a possible sighting of her in Arizona in late 2020, but that has never been corroborated. Indigenous people, especially Native women, go missing at a vast disproportionate rate as the general population. Native Americans make up 6.7% of Montana's population, but they account for 26% of missing persons reported in 2016 to 2018. Two-thirds of those cases involve women and girls. The circumstances of her disappearance are unclear, but her loved ones are very concerned and seek answers, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Declan Ford was born October 9, 2014. As an infant, he lived with his mother, 28-year-old Brittany Ford, and his father in the state of Georgia. In April 2015, Brittany called the police at 3:30 in the morning and claimed Declan's father was abusing him. The police responded to the home and advised Brittany to take the baby and stay somewhere else for the night. She agreed and said she would go to a hotel, but instead, she took Declan and began traveling in her white 2007 Nissan Versa to Columbus, Ohio, where her mother lived. While on her drive to Ohio, she called her mother and said the government was coming after her and she had to get away. Strangely, when she arrived at her mother's, she would accuse her stepfather of abusing her younger sister. Brittany's mother and brother thought she might be suffering from some kind of mental illness and took her to the hospital. She was then admitted to the psychiatric ward. Declan's father went to Ohio and tried to visit her, but she refused to see him. On April 19th, after 3 days in the hospital, was released and went to stay with her brother. A few days later, when her brother woke up, Brittany and Declan were gone. She said she was going out to get some food, but never returned. Her family would report her missing on May 7, 2015. On May 14th, a police officer in Indiana, unaware that Brittany and Declan were reported missing, helped her change a tire on her car. On May 16th, Brittany called her brother from Iowa and asked for $10,000. On May 17th, her car was found abandoned on the side of Highway 87 between Billings, Montana, and Sheridan, Wyoming. All of her belongings, including her medication and the baby's car seat, were still inside. They were last known to be in the area of Hardin, Montana. There has been no indication of their whereabouts since her car was found abandoned, and as of today, this case remains unsolved. Thomas Nelson McNair was born December 2, 1976 in Bozeman, Montana, to Clifford McNair and Arleta Berg. Nelson's parents would separate when he was only 5 years old. He was described as a sweet kid who grew up in poverty and raised by a hardworking mother. As a child, he spent a lot of time at Chico Hot Springs in the Bridger Mountain and loved to fish at the lagoon in Sacagawea Park. He did not have a lot of structure in his home and apparently did as he pleased. He was a talented artist who was often sketching and drawing pictures. He went to Park High School in Livingston and often found trouble. When he needed space, he would wander to the overpass or under the I-90 bridge to get high or to draw in one of his notebooks. He and his friends enjoyed grunge, Nirvana, mountain biking, and skateboarding. According to friends of his, the mid-90s, if you were a skateboarder in Livingston, you were viewed as nothing more than rebellious with a dark side. Friends said he frequently used marijuana and may have occasionally taken LSD. In the spring of 1995, Nelson expressed frustration to several friends that he had gone too far down the wrong path. One friend remembers a telephone call with Nelson in which he described his desire to get his life together. He alluded that he had been too far into drug activity, and the friend speculated that Nelson might have been helping transport some stuff. A drug raid took place in Park High School in February 1995 that set in motion a series of events which may have led to his death. During the raid, 22 students were all held in one room for many hours. Nelson was found to be in possession of a marijuana pipe and was later ironically fined $420 and given a choice to serve 10 days in jail, which would have caused him to lose credit in all of his classes his senior year or become an informant and narc on his friends. 1 month after his arrest, Nelson and another student were publicly disclosed as informants on the front page of the Livingston Enterprise. Alarmed by this, the second individual's family moved away. Strangely, Nelson then disappeared the next month on or about March 29, 1995. That night, he and his friends took turns shooting at empty beer bottles at the town dump with a .22 pistol. Nelson then dropped his friends off at home, and his last words were, "I'll pick you up tomorrow for school," and they laughed as they referred to the school as jail, as they often did. He then apparently went home and was never heard from again. Strangely, his room, which he usually padlocked when he would leave the house, was found unlocked. He had also been working as a dishwasher at the Stockman's Bar and bussing tables at a Mexican cafe, where he had plans to work that weekend, but no one from either place had heard from him. At first, his mother, Arlita, who worked graveyard shifts, wasn't alarmed when he went missing. Nothing appeared out of place, and his truck was parked in front of the house as he had left it. Wherever he had gone, he seemingly had gone willingly, either on foot or picked up by someone. After 3 days without contact, his aunt reported him missing on April 1st, and 6 days later, his father filed a second missing persons report. The police arrived at his house and ransacked his room. They would confiscate about 10 marijuana plants growing in his closet. However, a 9mm handgun that he kept in his bedroom was never recovered. Sadly, about a month later, on May 4th, 1995, fishermen discovered the 18-year-old's body floating in the Yellowstone River, about 14 miles east of Livingston. He was the victim of an apparent drowning. Sealed from the banks of the river clogged his lungs, an indicator that perhaps he was held face down and had sucked in the particles. Coroner Al Jenkins told the media in 2002 that there was nothing on the body to indicate that Nelson had been stabbed or shot, but a body traveling in the water suffers all sorts of bruises and abrasions. It's also possible that injury may have been inflicted before he went into the water. An article published immediately following his death stated that the initial forensic tests indicate he drowned and that no foul play was involved in his death. But an investigation would continue to try and determine if it was accidental, a suicide, or something else. Nelson was known to be a fantastic swimmer, and his family does not believe that he simply drowned or that he would commit suicide. Missing for 36 days, and then it showed up neatly under a rock. First of all, it was too religious. That wasn't Nelson. Other friends and family also don't believe the note is Nelson's. Apparently, his body was cremated without consent of his parents. Coroner Jenkins affirmed this in 2019 and added that he also had nothing to do with ordering the cremation. Family and friends would scatter his ashes near Livingston Peak in late May of 1995. There was a skateboard park built and named after Nelson in Livingston, but it has since been renamed. As for matters of investigation, Coroner Jenkins says that Nelson McNair's mystery remains an open case, but as of today, it remains unsolved. Shannon Claire LeBeau was born on October 31st, 1975 in Miller, South Dakota. His mother, Sally LeBeau, was from California and married a man named Gerald Anderson and had 5 children. In 1966, Gerald was struck by a piece of heavy equipment in a construction accident and died at the age of 30. Sally became widowed at the age of 28 and became solely responsible for her 5 children, who ranged in age from 6 months to 8 years. She then packed up and resettled on a friend's farm in South Dakota. There she met Val Claire LeBeau, nicknamed Blondie. He was a postal carrier, and the two would have 2 more children, Shannon in 1975 and Josh in 1977. Val Claire possessed a Jekyll and Hyde personality and was an alcoholic. He was a Vietnam vet and suffered from hallucinations and flashbacks, especially when he drank. Eventually, Sally would also work at the post office, divorce Blondie, and transfer from South Dakota to another post office in Thousand Oaks. Her father was there, dying of cancer, and she wanted to be nearby to take care of him. Only Sally, Shannon, and his younger brother Josh would move with her to California. The rest of Sally's older children remained in South Dakota. Sally again soon filed transfer requests and ultimately moved to Helena, Montana, where she eventually bought a small house at the 10 Mile Creek Estates. Shannon, a sophomore in high school who was very close to his mother, longed for a bond with his father, and he even once convinced Sally to allow him and Josh to move back to South Dakota to live with him. Within months, he and Josh began to resent their father because of his behavior. So Shannon and Josh would return to Helena, and he would try his best to readjust to Helena High School. Shannon and Steve Rummel met while they were students at the high school. The two often lifted weights together at the gym, but Steve had a bad reputation. The more reserved and less confident Shannon would become a follower of Steve and his actions. Shannon graduated from high school in 1994, and a few years later, he met a girl named Leslie and the couple had a baby girl, but they would never marry. The pair fought frequently and at times, their arguments were volatile. For starters, Leslie didn't like Shannon's choice of friends, particularly his association with Steve. Shannon and Steve would drink at dingy places and would get into arguments when Shannon stopped his generosity and refused to buy Steve additional drinks. Leslie and Shannon would split up, and she told him that he needed to grow up, take on more responsibility, and be more serious about accepting his role as a father. Around that time, Shannon and his own father became further estranged. When Blondie visited his newborn granddaughter, the visit did not end on a good note. Shannon began working as a cook at a busy sports bar in Helena. At one point, his ex-girlfriend Leslie indicated that she was considering returning to Helena with their daughter after a period of estrangement. Shannon was last seen on February 23, 1999, between 9 and 11 a.m. in the vicinity of the 900 block of Kessler Street in downtown Helena. Security cameras recorded him at a local bank around 9 a.m., where he withdrew about $3,000 in cash from the sale of his black Chevy Nova. According to reports, Steve had told Shannon that there was an old farmer who owned a muscle car somewhere close to Townsend, a car that he might like. Steve picked up Shannon, and in his initial statement to the police, he testified that they left Helena to scope out the vehicle and on the way shoot a couple cows. In his initial statement, he told police that he and Shannon were together in the Walking Mall area at about 11 a.m. Steve told Shannon's mom that after they returned from Townsend, he dropped Shannon off in downtown Helena at about 11 a.m. Steve also told Sally that Shannon relayed message through him to his mother that she should go lock up his mobile home and pick up his checks from work. Clearly, Shannon intended to go to Townsend and either view or purchase a car from an acquaintance of Steve's. According to multiple witnesses, Shannon had been very excited about buying the vehicle. 2 days before Shannon's disappearance on February 21, 1999, Steve had asked a friend whether they had a pistol that he could borrow, as he needed to help a rancher kill a cow. According to investigative reports, Steve told multiple different stories of the day Shannon disappeared. He told one group of people that he dropped Shannon off in downtown Helena, and yet another that he had taken Shannon to the bus station in Butte because Shannon was afraid of someone that he owed money to. Another witness stated that Steve said that he drove clear to Billings and dumped his friend off there. Shannon's red 1976 Chevrolet truck with the Montana license plate number 5T31420 apparently disappeared with him and has never been recovered. Steve has a very extensive criminal history. His first felony conviction dates back to 1994 on a theft charge. Since then, he has had arrests for obstructing a police officer, unlawful transaction with a minor, domestic abuse, tampering with or fabricating evidence, concealed weapons violations, and numerous probation violations. According to reports, Steve often made fun of Shannon and his hair, called him a girl, and used Shannon's friendship for his own benefit. Steve also allegedly threatened to kill a woman and stated that his older brother was a high priest of Satan worshippers, who had previously disposed of bodies. According to witness depositions, after Shannon vanished, Steve frequented the sports bar where Shannon worked, inquiring about the investigation. Shannon's disappearance has been treated as a homicide from the beginning. On June 8, 1999, Steve showed up at a used car lot in Helena and traded in the vehicle that he owned at the time of Shannon's disappearance, an orange 1976 Chevrolet pickup truck. When the Helena police confiscated that vehicle for crime lab analysis, the truck had been cleaned and detailed within the last few days. 2 days after the police returned the vehicle to the car dealer's lot, it was stolen. There was no broken glass in the lot, and it is assumed that the person who stole the vehicle had an extra set of keys. It has never been seen since. Searches have been conducted using cadaver dogs on foot and also by air. Authorities have searched streams and ditches, mine shafts and dark holes, even the cement plant that once employed Steve's father. 1 year after Shannon's disappearance, Steve Rummel was detained on a sexual assault charge. In a federal court appearance in 2001, he was remanded to the custody of the marshals after a detention hearing where a Helena police officer testified that the only real lead in Shannon's case led to Steve. He served his time on the sexual assault charge, and as a habitual violent offender, he must register his whereabouts with the state of Montana and apparently still lives there. Sadly, Shannon's mother died from cancer in 2007, shortly after Shannon was declared legally dead. In 2019, his daughter welcomed a son into the world. Earlier that same year, at her wedding celebration in Idaho, an empty chair was placed at the front row of the main aisle for her father. As of today, Shannon has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Megan Genovitz was born in Boulder, Colorado on January 12, 1978 to William Genovitz and Donna Smith. When she was 2 years old, her parents divorced and her mother moved her and her brother Joseph to the timbered foothills in St. Ignatius, Montana along St. Mary Road. They were living in a home in a remote wooded area with free room and board in exchange for her mother's nanny services. In the early afternoon hours of April 30th, 1980, Megan was playing with her 5-year-old brother and another young boy in the yard while her mother was inside doing chores. She says she only looked away for less than a minute and Megan disappeared. She would last see her daughter on the side of the house near the windows on the porch. Her mother quickly began searching for her and calling the neighbors. There was only one road leading up to her house in 1980, and neighbors said that they did not see any strangers or suspicious vehicles at all that day. Search and rescue arrived on the scene at approximately 6 p.m. that night. However, it became dark and an onslaught of rain and snow made the search more difficult. The creek called Cold Creek near the home turned from a narrow stream into what was described by an investigator as a raging river. Hundreds of people spent long hours looking for Megan for days with no success. Investigators do not believe Megan was abducted. They believe instead she most likely wandered off and drowned in a nearby stream, or was attacked by wild animals such as a grizzly bear. It rained and snowed for 10 days after Megan's disappearance. If she was exposed to the elements, she could not have survived very long. An extensive search of the St. Ignatius area turned up no sign of her. Her father came from Colorado to search for his daughter and would ride the area on horseback and examine animal scat for any trace of her clothing, but was unsuccessful. Megan's family believed she was abducted by a stranger to be raised as their own. Megan's mother claimed she was never known to wander off and doesn't believe she would go near the creek. Nobody in Megan's family is considered a suspect in her case, and neither of her parents were suspected to have harmed Megan or played a role in her disappearance. If Megan were alive today, she would be 43 years old. Megan's brother Joseph went on to graduate from the University of Colorado at Boulder. Sadly, he was among the more than 20 American tourists reported missing and presumed dead in the devastating South Asian tsunami that killed over 2,300 people in Thailand in 2004. Blackburn family, on the morning of November 10, 2015, a car was parked outside a home on Sunnyfield Court. Davy Blackburn had returned from his daily gym workout. Just as he was about to step out of his car, a phone call delayed him for a few minutes. After concluding the call, Davy leisurely exited his vehicle and entered his house. Upon opening the door, he froze. His gym bag slipped from his hands. His wife lay on the living room floor in a pool of blood. Confused and deeply shocked, he rushed to her side, felt for a pulse, and immediately dialed emergency services. The young woman was still alive, though the living room was in disarray. Items were scattered everywhere, and her purse was emptied. Upstairs, their small child was crying. Emergency services arrived within 8 minutes. Police officers and investigators filled the house right after it was cordoned off. Amanda Blackburn was urgently transported to the hospital. Now let's pivot back to understand more about Amanda's background so we don't miss vital details of this tragic story. Amanda Grace Bears was born on July 31, 1987, in Muskegon, Michigan. She went to school in Indianapolis, Indiana, until her family moved to Elkhart in 1995. There she graduated from Elkhart Christian Academy in 2006 and later earned an associate degree from Pensacola Christian College in Florida by 2008. Amanda grew up in a deeply religious family, where Christianity and God's teachings were central tenets of their lives. Her father served as the lead pastor at First Baptist Church in Elkhart. Thus, church sermons and psalter were ingrained in her from childhood. She knew them by heart and honored them wholly. While other children raced toward adulthood's temptations like parties and first loves, Amanda's passion lay in her faith and her dream of serving Jesus faithfully. Amanda was a blonde-haired, slim girl with a welcoming smile and genuine intentions. Not just beautiful on the outside, Amanda's thoughts and heart were pure. In every action, she displayed love for her neighbor. As a teenager, she took a vow of chastity, promising not to even kiss a man until marriage, and she always kept her word. Amanda's heart raced when she met Davy Blackburn, her true love. A native of Tuscaloosa, Alabama, Davy studied religion at Southern Wesleyan University and came from a devout Christian family. The two met on a blind date at a Hawk Nelson concert organized by Amanda's sister and Davy's best friend. At the time, they attended different colleges, but spent every vacation together. Their relationship was purely platonic and free from earthly desires. They enjoyed walks together and shared intimate thoughts and favorite excerpts from church books. Their bond grew stronger as they found joy in simple things and joked sincerely with each other. Once before returning to school, they had a playful milkshake drinking contest which Amanda lost. Davy teasingly called her Milk Girl, realizing then that she was the one he wanted to marry. The couple maintained a long-distance relationship for quite some time, constantly messaging via messengers, calling each other, and chatting for hours. They spent every vacation together. Their respect for the seriousness of their relationship led them to see a psychologist to learn how to communicate properly. On August 1, 2008, Amanda and Davy Blackburn were married. After the wedding, Davy told friends that from the moment he kissed Amanda, he knew there was a special bond between them, a part of God's plan. For the first 4 years after their marriage, the Blackburns lived in South Carolina, where Davy served as an associate pastor at New Spring Church under Pastor Perry Noble. But the young man wanted more, and he suggested to Amanda that they move to Indianapolis to organize a new church for youth. Amanda was reluctant to leave her family and part with her loved ones. For a time, she struggled with the need to leave South Carolina. Eventually, she relented after her husband told her that God must have big things in store for them. In 2012, the Blackburns moved from South Carolina to Indianapolis to plant an independent high-profile church on the city's north side. The religious organization started by the young family focused on young people, as made clear in the weekly videos they posted on their website, which discussed relationship advice, conflict resolution, and biblical perspectives on intimate relationships. By 2014, the family had welcomed their firstborn child, Weston Blackburn. They were perfectly happy with their comfortable home on a quiet street and their favorite roles within the church. This church was regularly attended by many young people who listened to and believed in their sermons. The family lived in perfect harmony and understanding. However, everything changed on November 10, 2015. Ambulance crews arrived at the Blackburn residence in the 2800 block of Sunnyfield Court around 8 a.m. The pregnant young woman was rushed to the hospital where she was hooked up to a ventilator and underwent several resuscitations. Sadly, Amanda died the next day along with her unborn baby. As it turned out, the family had been expecting a baby girl who was named Evie Grace at her burial. Her death sparked significant sympathy and prayers on social media over an extended period of time, as friends, family members, and strangers mourned Amanda with public posts. On November 11th, the day Amanda was officially declared dead, Davy released an official statement saying that Amanda made it her life's calling to love and serve everyone. She dedicated her life to knowing Jesus as her personal savior, and through her passing and legacy, countless others will come to a saving faith in Christ. I firmly believe that God remains good, turning our tragedy into triumph, and that indeed the best is yet to come, Davy wrote. The murder of the pregnant woman was not only a devastating blow to the entire family, but also a profound shock to the entire state. People demanded that those responsible for Amanda and her unborn child's death be brought to justice. In his first interview, Davy Blackburn recounted finding his wife Amanda injured and unconscious on the living room floor. She was partially unclothed, with her underwear lying nearby and herself lying face down in a pool of blood. The pastor informed investigators that he had left the house around 6 a.m. to go to the fitness center for a workout. When he departed, he left the door unlocked. He mentioned this habit during his statement, saying, "You always do that too, don't you? You leave and don't lock the door." While it's hard to say whether securing the door would have prevented this tragedy entirely, it's evident that it made entry much easier for the criminals involved. Unfortunately, Amanda did not have precious time to contact emergency services, resulting in an attack that left her with 3 gunshot wounds, one of them being fatal. No arrests were made in the days immediately following this heinous crime. However, police quickly determined that Davy Blackburn was not involved in this horrific incident. Trial transcripts reveal additional details from Davy Blackburn's testimony, alongside accounts from witnesses such as Scott Floyd, an emergency medical paramedic from the Indianapolis Fire Department who arrived at their home following Davy's 911 call. According to Scott Floyd's testimony, upon arrival they found Davy Blackburn outside at the end of the driveway with blood on his hands, but maintaining a very calm demeanor. Scott Floyd stated that Blackburn appeared not to fully comprehend what had transpired with Amanda when they reached him at their residence. Davy claimed he came home from the gym at about 7:30 a.m. and continued his phone call with his friend Kenneth Wagner in the driveway. He occasionally got out, strolled down the driveway, and peeked through the front door window to see if baby Weston was awake. He said he finished his call, entered his home at 8:10 a.m., and found Amanda lying face down on the floor. He thought she was sick or unconscious. He called emergency services at 8:22 a.m. Took him 12 minutes to make that call. In an emergency situation, 12 minutes is quite a long time. He repeatedly said he thought something had gone wrong with the pregnancy and maybe she'd gotten dizzy and fallen. Did he not notice after 12 minutes that there was brain matter about 5 feet away from her body? Emergency room Dr. Scott Floyd testified that the blood on her head was coagulated, leading him to believe that the gunshot had occurred a couple of hours earlier, but those transcripts were not made public. Davy was asked if he had called anyone else after dialing 911. He said he called his father next. Defense attorneys did not cross-examine Davy Blackburn. Authorities corroborated his story with surveillance footage from the gym. Thus, he was not among the suspects. An autopsy conducted on November 12th showed Amanda suffered a gunshot wound to the back of her head. She also had a gunshot wound to her lower left arm that went through her biceps and another one that entered and exited her upper back. Multiple scratches were found on her left cheek along with a split lip and a knocked-out lower tooth. These injuries indicated a possible struggle between Amanda and her attacker. A thorough investigation was launched. CCTV footage from nearby streets was examined. Neighbors and family acquaintances were interviewed as well. One neighbor reported hearing gunshots about 35 minutes after Davy left the house. Another neighbor, Reginald Townsall, mentioned their street wasn't known for incidents like this and expressed shock by stating that the Blackburns didn't deserve this tragedy. Everyone thought highly of the Blackburn family. They were seen as wonderful and loving people by their community. Based on Amanda's injuries and the missing bank cards as well as MacBook bag, robbery seemed to be an initial theory during this investigation. On the morning of November 10, 2015, several emergency calls were made reporting home invasions at various residences near Blackburn's home. Around 5:20 a.m., one woman reported waking up to find her cell phone, laptop, purse, and keys missing from her apartment. Her car was also gone from the parking lot. The sliding glass door to her apartment was open. 3 hours later, another woman reported a burglary. Someone had broken through the patio screen and entered the house. According to police reports, for televisions, a MacBook Pro, a Tiffany pearl necklace, a pink women's sweater, a remote control, a bag of oranges, and bedding were missing from the residence. Just 5 minutes after that second call, another individual from Sunnyfield Court contacted emergency services. This time it was Davy Blackburn. Lieutenant Richard of the Indianapolis Police Department stated that police were investigating potential connections between this homicide and the other burglaries in the same neighborhood that morning. Police have not disclosed details about the ongoing investigation to maintain its integrity. However, after obtaining images of possible suspects from one of the burglarized homes, they released these images to the public for assistance in identifying and helping with the investigation. Davy Blackburn expressed confidence that the police department was doing everything within their power to apprehend his wife's perpetrator. Investigators assured him that they had unprecedented support to continue their investigation and were optimistic that promising leads would soon help identify those responsible. Key clues instrumental in tracking down 3 suspects included a stolen pink sweater, cell phone records, and an ATM receipt. The receipt and sweater were discovered in a stolen Chrysler Sebring, used during the robberies. Authorities recovered this vehicle on November 11th, near Blackburn's home. The debit card listed on the receipt matched Amanda Blackburn's stolen card. Investigators obtained a warrant to examine ATM camera footage and discovered video showing the driver concealing his face with a stolen pink sweater. Police relied on DNA testing, surveillance footage, and witnesses' testimonies to identify those responsible for these crimes. The results from the DNA testing of the sweater confirmed that J.N. Watson was one of the suspects. Watson's identification marked the first significant breakthrough in the case, as indicated in the affidavit. Cell phone records were obtained because Watson's number was already in the database due to his parole for a prior burglary. Subsequently, Diana Gordon's cell phone records were also retrieved. These records demonstrated that both Watson's and Gordon's cell phones were present in the vicinity when the crime occurred. The phone records further disclosed that Gordon and Watson were near the Chase Bank, where Amanda's debit card was used on the day of the murder. Larry Taylor emerged as a critical piece of information when police examined surveillance footage from the area. This footage enabled them to identify Taylor's phone number and trace his address. In the subsequent days, reports surfaced indicating that a firearm had been located near the Blackburn residence. According to police, an individual delivered this gun to the Broad Ripple Fire Department, claiming they had found it outside the couple's home. Crime lab technicians analyzed the weapon over 2 weeks of investigation and detective work. Police eventually charged 18-year-old Larry Taylor and 21-year-old Jolyn Watson with Amanda Blackburn's murder. Another individual, 24-year-old Diana Gordon, who was suspected of burglary, was arrested for a parole violation and not charged with a felony. She did not enter Blackburn's home during the incident. The crime lab confirmed that a gun found near Amanda Blackburn's home was indeed used in committing the crime. All 3 suspects were taken into custody. During questioning, Larry Taylor admitted to shooting Amanda twice, explaining he acted out of fear she might scratch him after she jumped on him. After she fell over, he leaned down and shot her in the back of her head, subsequently watching her bleed to death. The criminal trio intended to rob the Blackburn house for money. They chose their target upon noticing that Amanda's husband had left their front door unlocked when he went to the gym. Inside, they confronted Amanda to prevent her from interfering. During this confrontation, Taylor struck her with a gun. Watson and Gordon saw the woman and decided it was time to leave. They already had the stolen bank cards, so they went searching for an ATM. After failing to withdraw $500 from one, they successfully obtained $1,400 from another. This is when CCTV captured them. They then headed back to the Blackburn house to pick up Taylor. In their absence, a struggle took place inside. Amanda, regaining consciousness after being struck, lunged at the intruder. He tackled her in response. Following this, Taylor placed the stolen debit cards in the accomplice's car, who was at an ATM during the crime. Upon their return, he confessed to shooting Amanda, according to court records. The Blackburn home was their 3rd target on November 10th. Earlier, in their first break-in, they stole a laptop, wallet, and car while the residents slept. Inside that home, they noticed a recording camera, but moved on regardless. Next, they broke into another house through a patio window and stole 4 televisions, a laptop, jewelry, a bag of oranges, and a pink sweater that later helped police identify them. Court documents detailed this evidence collected against the suspects. The crucial piece was Watson's DNA found on the pink sweater used to cover his face from surveillance as he tried withdrawing cash with Amanda Blackburn's bank card. Watson and Gordon cooperated with authorities in return for reduced sentences. Larry Taylor waived his right to remain silent and admitted being near the burglary scene, but claimed confusion about his activities. Formal charges were brought by the county prosecutor. Larry Taylor faces 13 charges, including felony murder, after knowingly killing Amanda Blackburn. Jalen Watson is charged with felony murder, along with multiple counts of burglary and theft. Diana Gordon, already in custody for parole violation, also faces burglary charges. Additionally, there was a fourth person aware of these crimes but not actively participating in them. He was questioned and released. The Indianapolis Metropolitan Police Department's Violent Crimes Unit worked with the gang unit and federal marshals to arrest Taylor. Police Chief Rick Height praised the cooperation that led to the arrest. The detectives worked tirelessly all day without sleep to solve the murders in the city. With assistance from Assistant U.S. Attorney Josh Minkler and Prosecutor Terry Curry, justice was served. Because the victim was pregnant, prosecutors said they might consider filing additional charges related to the fetus. Even though the woman's underwear had been removed and her shirt pulled up, they stated there was no evidence to support rape charges. Larry Taylor's first trial took place in December 2021, but it ended abruptly when it was discovered that a juror had shared information about the case with other jurors. This disclosure interrupted the trial, leading to a mistrial being declared. The final trial took place in October 2022. Jury selection was more thorough this time. Over 100 individuals were considered as potential jurors, each having to fill out a 16-page questionnaire for attorneys to evaluate if a fair verdict could be reached. Larry Joe Taylor received an 86-year sentence at the Indiana State Correctional Institution for Amanda Blackburn's murder and for additional charges related to a home burglary. Diana Gordon and Jalen Watson agreed to plea deals and testified against Larry Taylor during the trial. Both received sentences ranging from 20 to 35 years in prison. Jalen Watson and Larry Taylor are currently incarcerated in the Marion County Jail. A murder conviction in Indiana can result in a prison sentence of 45 to 60 years, with some cases punishable by life imprisonment or even the death penalty. Prosecutors filed a motion to enhance Larry Taylor's sentence, potentially adding up to an additional 20 years since Amanda Blackburn was pregnant at the time of her death. Davy Blackburn, Amanda's husband and a church pastor, expressed relief that those responsible for his wife's death have been apprehended and will no longer pose a threat to anyone else. Amanda Blackburn's death has touched the hearts of many people, including the chief executive. Her funeral at a Christian church was attended by more than 2,000 individuals. Among those in attendance was Governor Mike Pence. The resident church has set up a donation page to assist with Amanda Blackburn's funeral and medical expenses. Davy Blackburn expressed hope for a judicial system that will wisely handle those responsible for his family's immense pain. Remarkably, he has consistently reported that he has chosen to forgive Amanda's killers. "I was very relieved to learn of the arrest," he told reporters. "Although everything inside me wants to hate, be angry, and despair, I choose the path of forgiveness, grace, and hope." Kelly Sue Kermanite was born December 16, 1972 and grew up in Johnstown, New York and graduated from Fonda High School in 1992. In 1999, she married Jason Kermanite and they had a daughter that same year. In 2008, at the age of 36, Kelly Sue lived with her 8-year-old daughter Ashley, her husband Jason, and his parents at 330 West Main Street in Johnstown, New York. She worked at the Rite Aid in Amsterdam, New York as a supervisor, and her husband worked as a volunteer firefighter. On September 30th, 2008, she and a coworker locked up and walked out of the store together. She left work at 9:45 p.m. after getting into her dark green 1998 Saturn Aura. At 1:53 a.m. the next morning, a Johnstown police officer on routine patrol found her car in Frog Hollow just off West Montgomery Street in Johnstown, just 3 blocks from her home. Strangely, it wasn't found on a route she would normally travel. The car was on fire when it was found, and it was completely destroyed. Neighbors had called the police about shots fired in that area at midnight. However, there was no sign of Kelly Sue and no evidence of human remains found in the vehicle. Authorities initially thought the vehicle fire was arson, but now they think it could have been an accident, as the car had been having radiator problems. Her marriage was troubled when she disappeared, but her loved one stated she would never have left without making arrangements for the care of her daughter, and her social security number hasn't had any activity. Her husband is not considered a suspect in her disappearance. However, many people have reported odd behavior by him after her disappearance, but he continues to maintain his innocence. Police have conducted many searches, including one with the help of a state police helicopter over a wooded area near her home. Police and forest rangers performed several foot searches with cadaver dogs, but found nothing. As of today, Kelly Sue has never been found, and this case remains unsolved. Jalik Rainwalker was born August 2, 1995, and nicknamed Jay. He was sadly born addicted to crack cocaine and alcohol and spent his early childhood in 6 different foster homes. He was even sexually assaulted as an infant. This led him to have violent temper tantrums and caused his 4 siblings to be afraid of him. One set of foster parents that he stayed with for a 4-year period stated that his tantrums could last as long as an hour at a time. He also suffered from developmental issues, had a mild speech impediment, and was diagnosed with reactive attachment disorder, but apparently was not treated with any medications or therapy. In 2007, at the age of 12, he had been living for 5 years with foster parents Jocelyn McDonald and Stephen Kerr in Greenwich, New York. Jay's foster family led a non-traditional lifestyle in rural Washington County, New York. They had no running water, they used outhouses for toileting, and the only electricity came from a generator that ran for several hours during the day, and everyone slept in one room. The family stated they lived this way because it was better for the environment. On November 1, 2007, Jay and his foster father spent the night alone in his father's unoccupied home at 11 Heel Street in Greenwich, New York. He said when he woke up the next morning, he found a note Jay left behind that read, "Dear everybody, I'm sorry for everything. I won't be a bother anymore. Goodbye, Jay." Stephen then reported him missing at 9 a.m. Jay is described as a very intelligent but very troubled child by his former foster parents, Jody and Larry Schoen. The Schoens had originally planned to adopt him, but after he attacked their daughter when he was 7 years old, they decided that he could no longer stay in their home, and he went to live with Stephen and Jocelyn, who had 3 biological sons and 1 adopted daughter, and would eventually adopt Jay as well. On October 23, 2007, Stephen called a crisis hotline and said that Jay was unmanageable and he had threatened to sexually assault a young boy in his homeschool group. His adoptive mother was afraid of him and no longer wanted him in her home, and his parents wanted to reverse the adoption. The crisis worker said it was not possible to reverse the adoption and suggested that they place him in temporary respite care instead. He was then sent to the home of Elaine and Tom Person, licensed foster parents who had provided respite care for him in the past. They kept him until November 1st, then returned him to Stephen, who planned to send him to another respite home the next day. That was the day Jay was reported missing. Within a few days, police denounced they thought he could have met with foul play, since it is unlikely that a child of that age could survive on his own. However, the possibilities that Jay ran away or committed suicide have not been ruled out either. Jocelyn took a polygraph test, but Stephen refused to take one. Both parents maintained their innocence in his case and stated they believed Jay simply ran away. They suggested that he might be living with an African-American family, as he had always considered himself African-American rather than biracial and had wanted to live with other African-Americans. Elaine and Tom Person said that the farewell note Jay supposedly left on the night he vanished was not a goodbye note, but rather a letter he was assigned to write by his father for homework. Stephen allegedly told him to write a note apologizing to the people he had harmed, and Tom saw him writing it. Although he didn't actually read it, the Persons believe this was the note found after Jay vanished. Elaine, several of Jay's former foster parents, and his adoptive maternal grandparents have started a website publicizing Jay's disappearance. Elaine wrote she believed Stephen harmed Jay on the day he went missing and caused his disappearance. In January 2008, police named Stephen as a person of interest in his disappearance. They stated they had video surveillance camera footage of Stephen driving his van around Greenwich after midnight on the night of his disappearance when he claims to have been sleeping. Cell phone records also show that Stephen took a different route to the house than he had said he did. Later in January, an anonymous letter about the case was sent to several local media outlets. The letter read as follows. Nico Anthony Lisi was born March 11, 1993 and grew up in Addison in Harnell, New York. He was close to his family, athletic, but had a disobedient wild streak. Looking for a change and a breath of fresh air, he moved to Franklin, Tennessee to live with relatives his junior year of high school. He would get into trouble and spend a few days in juvenile detention and then return home to New York afterward. After returning home, he would be incarcerated on a burglary charge and then would be charged with statutory rape. He was allegedly involved with a 14-year-old girl, and the two had an ongoing relationship that began when he was 17 and carried on until he was 18. However, days after being charged with statutory rape, he went missing. Police initially believed that he was a criminal on the run. The last time he was known to be seen alive was at his uncle's house in Addison. His uncle has reported that Nico and his friend Robert Knight, nicknamed Robbie, came to his house on September 30th, 2011 at 2 p.m. driving a gold GMC Canyon pickup. His uncle states that Robbie told him that the pickup truck was his grandfather's. They said they were heading to Buffalo, New York to spend time with friends and maybe go camping. One report states that the two said they were going to meet some girls they met on the internet. The next day, on October 1st, Robbie suddenly appeared at his parents' house in Romulus, Michigan, an almost 7-hour drive from Addison. He told his family that Nico had dropped him off and stolen his phone. However, no one witnessed Nico actually dropping Robbie off in Michigan. Nico's grandmother was able to contact him on his cell phone around 5 p.m. that same day on October 1st. He hastily answered the phone and told her he was unable to talk right now, but he would call her back later. The next day, his phone pinged off a cell tower in Franklin, Tennessee at or near a residence on Flintlock Drive at 4:08 p.m. This was the last signal from his cell phone. 2 days later, on October 3rd, Nico's mother got his driver's license in the mail. Someone had found it on a street in Hornell, New York, about 15 minutes from his home and mailed it. His mother, who was already worried because she hadn't heard from him in several days, got even more concerned after receiving the license. In addition, Nico's Facebook page had been abruptly shut down without warning around that same time. His family then reported him missing a couple days later on October 5th, and the Michigan police would question Robbie on October 8th. While he was being questioned, the police decided to take him to the hospital for a psychiatric evaluation, as he appeared to be having a mental breakdown. Robbie was released from the hospital the next day. At 8 p.m. on October 10th, he was found dead of a drug overdose at his parents' home. For years after Nico disappeared, New York police traveled to Franklin, Tennessee to look for answers. After only a few days, New York police located the truck that Nico and Robbie had been traveling in the last time they were seen at Nico's uncle's house. The truck was uncovered in a private garage in Nashville, Tennessee, at a property owned by a family in Franklin, and it was completely stripped down and disassembled. The truck was found at a friend's house that Nico went to school with while in Tennessee. The young man that lived there and one of his friends allegedly had stripped the truck down. It is unclear whether evidence was ever processed from the truck. It had originally been stolen from a man in Addison by Nico or Robbie or both. The Sylvan Park home where the truck was found was known at the time to have been rented out to tenants and was the location of frequent house parties for teens and young adults. The following people that are involved in Nico's life have since died: Robbie, Robbie's brother and father, Nico's high school friend that lived where the disassembled truck was found, and the friend that allegedly helped him disassemble the truck. Until the truck was found in 2016, New York was convinced Nico was on the run. Some people believe that Nico is still alive and hiding out. Corey Lynn Anderson was born April 4th, 1972. In 2000, she met Ken Anderson and they would marry soon after. Corey had 2 daughters from a previous marriage, and she would have a son a year later with Ken. In 2005, Corey and Ken separated when Corey discovered that Ken had never legally divorced his previous wife. She had told those close to her that Ken abused her when they were together, and despite being broken up, Ken continued to pursue her. She even had to go as far as to take out an order of protection against him after he placed a tracking device on her car. And in 2007, he was arrested for violating that order and was placed on probation. In 2008, Corey lived in Busty, New York on Wellman Road, and had been separated from Ken for over 2 years. She continued to be a devoted mother and worked from home as a medical transcriptionist and part-time as a technical assistant at the Holtquist Library at Jamestown Community College. She was trying to move on past Ken and even had a new boyfriend. However, on October 28, 2008, Corey would vanish and would never be heard from again. She was last seen at the former Lake City Dodge on Washington Street in Jamestown, New York. She stopped there to visit her boyfriend, then left at 1:10 p.m. driving her dark blue 2005 Dodge Caravan. She would never show up for her scheduled meeting at 3:15 p.m. that day and also failed to pick up her son for school, which was both very uncharacteristic of her. Upon investigating her home, items were found that would suggest she had gone there after leaving the car dealership. 2 days after she went missing, her van was found abandoned on a trail off Courtright Road 2 miles from her home. Her purse was also missing and has not been found. It's described as an 8-inch black purse with a GH base and company logo. Her cell phone has been turned off since she went missing, and her keys are also missing. Corey's boyfriend was eliminated as a suspect in her disappearance. Prior to her disappearance, Corey sent an email to a relative. The email, a copy of which was provided to HuffPost, reads, in part, "Things with Ken have not fully resolved and probably never will. I have come to the conclusion that he is psycho and thrives off trying to make others feel like they are insane. We finalized a visitation schedule in the middle of January, whereby July 1st, he would have had a regular visitation schedule, meaning every other weekend and 1 night a week. But he left town 2 weeks after the schedule was all put in place. It was a gradual, unsupervised visitation schedule. He went to Alabama until June. I heard he got fired from another job, so he is back. He has not asked about visitation with Zach. The only thing he has taken court action on is the support. I would like to get the property all worked out and just move on as much as possible. I feel like he is dragging his feet with that because of a control issue. After she went missing, Ken married for the 6th time. In 2016, 8 years after Corey vanished, he was arrested in Kentucky. He was charged with kidnapping, unlawful imprisonment, and first-degree rape after he allegedly took his new wife from New York to Richmond, Kentucky against her will. He sexually assaulted her and held her captive in a hotel room at a day's end, threatening to kill her if she tried to escape. She stated he had assaulted her before and that he had controlled nearly every part of her life. Many people believe that Ken is the prime suspect in Corey's disappearance. However, he has never been charged, and as of today, the case remains unsolved. Patrick Kennedy Alford Jr. was born November 28, 2002. His biological mother, Jennifer Rodriguez, lived in Staten Island, where she would lose custody of Patrick and his 2 sisters for alleged neglect. At the age of 7, his mother was jailed for theft, and he was placed in a foster home with his 4-year-old sister Jaylene at the Spring Creek Development Building at 130 Vandalia Avenue in Brooklyn, New York. Patrick was struggling at the foster home, and his foster mom, Labrada, did not speak English very well, and Patrick did not speak Spanish. He had told her that he wanted to run away to be with his biological mother. She stated that he had attempted to run away multiple times and attacked his foster siblings and even threatened to harm himself. 3 weeks after being in the foster home, he went missing. He was last seen at the foster home at approximately 9 p.m. on January 22, 2010. He was helping with household chores, and when he took the trash out, he never returned. His mother Jennifer reportedly knew the address of his foster home, and her aunt claimed she had threatened to take Patrick back. A few days after Patrick's disappearance, a judge ordered Jennifer to present her son at a family court hearing. She stated she didn't have him and didn't know where he was. She was jailed for a few days for contempt, but was then released when the City Administration for Children's Services determined she didn't have any connection with Patrick's disappearance. Patrick has still not been located, and Jennifer still maintains her innocence in his disappearance, stating she believed he ran away and is hiding somewhere. Various other members of Patrick's family, including people as far away as Maryland and Florida, have been investigated in his case. Several of Patrick's relatives have even accused each other of hiding him. In October 2010, Jennifer filed a federal lawsuit against New York City, the Administration for Children's Services, Patrick's foster mother, and the foster parents' apartment complex. She alleged that the ACS took Patrick from her custody without sufficient cause, and that they were negligent when they placed him in an unfit foster home instead of with relatives such as his father. It is reported that he wasn't placed with his father because he was living in a homeless shelter that didn't allow children, and he also had a domestic violence charge. A federal judge threw out the suit in March 2011, but ruled that Jennifer could sue individual caseworkers and St. Vincent Services, the child care agency in charge of Patrick's case. A wrongful death claim was added to Jennifer's initial damages suit on the 3rd anniversary of Patrick's disappearance. She stated she filed the suit to get answers in her son's disappearance. The suit was eventually settled for $6 million in August of 2018. The money is being held by a corporate trustee and is to be used to aid in the search for Patrick and to benefit him if he is located alive. Patrick's father, Patrick Sr., was shot during a home invasion at his apartment in Brooklyn when 5 men broke into the apartment and fired 5 shots, hitting him in the head and the leg. He is now paralyzed on one side and lived in a nursing home for a period of time and still hopes his son will be found safe. His mother, Jennifer, has been researching and writing a book about her experience with the Administration for Children's Services. She reported in an interview that she was molested by a family friend when she was 4 years old, and that led to some of her mental health issues. She has kept all Patrick's belongings in her apartment, including the sheets he last slept on, his slippers, sneakers, game chair, and his yellow bike helmet. In 2010, the NYPD told Pix 11 it had interviewed 14,000 people and entered 9,000 apartments in the quest to find Patrick. Registered sex offenders were also interviewed that lived in the community. Investigators believe Patrick may still be in the Brooklyn area, and if he is still alive, he would be 18 years old at the time of this video release. However, he still remains missing and the case unsolved. Case of Brett Ryan. Brett grew up in a prosperous and large Canadian family. His parents, Bill and Susan, had 4 sons. Brett's parents tried to teach him through their own actions. His father held a prestigious job at the Toronto Star daily newspaper and had various hobbies like sports, yoga, and psychology. Likewise, Susan was very hardworking. Their entire household rested on her shoulders. She not only devoted time to her husband and children, but also managed the huge house in Toronto's prestigious area without any help from gardeners or craftsmen. Just like his older brothers, Brett went to university after high school. He always aimed to be better than his siblings, so he advertised painting services in a local newspaper for Toronto residents' houses and fences. Initially, things went well. He made his first earnings and Susan was proud of him, often using him as an example for others. However, making money as a part-time job is one thing. Dropping out of university to spend all your time inhaling paint fumes without proper education is another matter altogether. After some time in university, decided to drop out. For the first couple of years after this decision, Brett still felt confident compared to his older brothers. After a while, when Christopher and Leland graduated and found jobs in their fields, Brett's authority began to Christopher started working for the City of Toronto Transit Commission and Leland, the family artist and designer. Following their studies, they moved out of their parents' home. Brett, to avoid spending part of his earnings on rent, stayed with his father, mother, and younger brother who attended a school for gifted children. With each passing year, Brett grew more desperate due to his mounting debts and his inability to pay them off. He developed depression. By 2007, when Brett was already 26 years old, his debt had ballooned past $60,000. Although Brett was considered an intelligent individual, he did know how to effectively use his mind. He always put on a cheerful face and helped everyone around him. He was a participant in volunteer initiatives. Consequently, No one could fathom the depth of despair within him. Eventually, a fateful moment arrived when nothing could be done. On October 28, 2007, Brett had no work orders for house painting or any other tasks around the house. Orders were always scarce in the fall, since everyone typically painted their houses in spring or summer. With winter approaching and no prospects for earnings, there was no time to wait. Brett donned all the old clothes he had in his closet, a hat, a long sweater from his older brother, and a scarf knitted by his mother. This particular scarf was comically long. Brett hadn't worn it before, but now found it useful. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank, located on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Clutching some thick folder, Brett waited for his turn at the bank. When an employee finally summoned him, he approached her and quietly informed her that he had a gun with him. He instructed her to take all the money out of the bank's cash register and give it to him. The girl, shaken with trembling hands, handed him all the cash from the register. Brett then quietly exited the building to avoid drawing the attention of the guards. Once outside, he ran. Upon counting the stolen money, he realized it amounted to just over $1,000. This sum was far from sufficient to clear his debts. He calculated that robbing about 60 banks would be necessary to meet his financial obligations. Despite how improbable that seemed, saw no alternative. In the initial days following the robbery, Brett was consumed with fear that the police might track him down. To avoid detection, he refrained from going home and informed his mother that he had a job in a neighboring town. Instead, he spent nights in his car, cautiously approaching his house periodically to check if any police cars were hidden nearby. Each visit confirmed silence and no signs of pursuit. This reassured Brett that his plan was working. The success of the first robbery led to more, a second, a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett took precautions to change his appearance by wearing different clothes, purchased secondhand or even retrieved from trash and burning them afterwards. He also invested in a fake beard from a costume store, since bank employees always mentioned his beard in their testimonies. News outlets in Toronto began covering stories about the bearded robber, but despite this notoriety, he never managed to gain substantial amounts through these crimes, the most being just $3,000 per robbery. Brett's hit a snag when police identified his vehicle on surveillance cameras and traced it back to his residence. Lacking solid evidence for an arrest, law enforcement decided simply to monitor him closely. For about 15 days following this new development, refrained from further robberies, even though no more than 3 or 4 days typically passed between crimes before this. His unusual hiatus led some officers to believe they were tailing an innocent person and wasting resources on a dead end. But then fortune turned in favor of law enforcement. Brett left the house, got into a car, and later exited not far from the bank. Wearing a different and unusual outfit, he entered the branch and remained there for some time. Upon leaving, he was immediately apprehended by the police, who announced that the much-discussed bearded robber had finally been caught. Brett had been under investigation for 7 months and was charged with armed robbery. Interestingly, despite having a gun permit, the bearded robber always entered the bank unarmed. He did not even carry a kitchen knife. In total, faced 19 charges and was subsequently imprisoned. Brett and his family filed multiple appeals, which led to only 8 of the 19 counts being upheld. However, Brett didn't stop there. At the first opportunity to apply for parole, he submitted a petition. In it, he requested consideration of his severe depression, caused by 2 failed relationships and substantial debt. Additionally, he emphasized that he committed these crimes without intending to harm anyone and without carrying any weapons. His remarks were taken, however, to secure early release from prison. He had to undergo sessions with a psychologist. These sessions had a positive impact on Brett's behavior and mindset while incarcerated. During this period, he did not communicate with his family but eventually took steps to mend those relationships. The positive changes were recognized by the commissioners overseeing his case. Consequently, on November 24, 2010, Brett was released from prison. Nonetheless, this hard-won freedom turned out to be more challenging than anticipated. Before becoming known as Brett the Bank Robber, He was simply a painter burdened with personal struggles. Post-incarceration life proved difficult. Few companies were willing to hire an ex-convict with such a tainted background. Even when hired for house painting services, clients would cancel upon recognizing him as the infamous bearded robber. The social repercussions extended to his family as well. Neighbors who once praised Susan's garden began spreading unpleasant rumors about them. The Ryan family decided to sell their house hastily and move to Scarborough, where Susan started cultivating her new garden afresh. Despite these challenges, Brett managed to find employment at a trading company. However, his salary was modest. His parents also assisted financially in helping him rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist. Each session, the specialist advised him not to sever ties with his family. The psychologist's advice proved effective. However, Brett's financial situation remained precarious. Then, in September 2011, a significant positive event occurred in his life. He met Kristen Baxter. Kristen was an exceptional girl. She owned an apartment with windows that offered stunning view of the sea, which provided the young couple with a picturesque landscape to enjoy. She was also athletic, maintaining excellent physical condition. Crucially, she was unconcerned about Brett's past. As a couple, they traveled periodically and had even visited Australia. Brett's parents were delighted to observe his relationship with Kristen flourish. They were confident that Kristen would encourage him to advance in life and secure his place in society. Life seemed to improve for Brett until his father passed away. This loss profoundly affected him and triggered a return of depressive symptoms. Consequently, he had to increase his visits to the psychologist and spend time supporting his mother, both emotionally and financially. Despite his limited resources, realizing that their relationship needed to advance beyond casual dating, given their maturity, decided to make a commitment to Kristen. He had saved some money and discussed his intentions with his mother. He expressed his desire to propose to Kristen, the goal being a memorable proposal she couldn't refuse. Understanding her son's intention, Susan provided additional funds for him to purchase an engagement ring. Notably, the couple had previously discussed their future together, and it was clear that Kristen did not require an extravagant gift or similar symbols of commitment. Brett's proposal to Kristen meant the world to her, signaling his serious intentions. Despite this, he decided to go the extra mile and purchased a gold ring adorned with a sizable diamond for his beloved. Naturally, Kristen accepted his proposal. From there, they began planning their wedding. Brett, with all of Kristen's decisions, nodding in approval. However, the rising costs and financial implications unsettled him. He started worrying about his career prospects and financial stability. Determined to secure a stable job, Brett found an engineering position at a prominent tech company online. He meticulously prepared his resume and applied for the job. To his delight, he was invited for an interview and subsequently received a job offer. Elated by the news, Brett shared it with Kristen and his mother. Eager to make a good impression at his new job, he asked his mother for money to purchase an expensive suit. As always, she didn't refuse him. Yet, just when everything seemed perfect, Brett received a disappointing call from the company. Their security team had uncovered details of his criminal past, leading them to rescind their offer. This news hit Brett hard. It was like a bolt from the blue. His spirits dropped immediately. Frustration set in as he considered the futility of ongoing interviews, each ending in rejection due to his past. Faced with repeated setbacks, Brett decided that rather than continuing with futile efforts and investing time in studies that seemed pointless due to his tarnished record, he would use the funds allocated for university studies on their wedding instead. Brett thus found himself back where he had recently escaped from, but kept certain truths hidden from loved ones, including dropping out of university and being rejected from the engineering role. He maintained appearances by dressing in professional attire each morning before heading to paint houses, changing clothes en route. To further sustain this facade among friends and family, Brett frequently updated social media profiles with pictures, seemingly originating from an office environment or business events, images sourced off the internet, and would even pretend he's resolving urgent work-related matters during family gatherings by faking phone calls regarding work issues. In September 2016, after a 5-year relationship with Kristen, Brett sought to plan a wedding. He demonstrated a remarkable ability to conceal his true situation, successfully creating the illusion of a stable life. Despite being a common painter, he projected an image of success and prosperity. Agreed to rent an expensive restaurant, requiring $100 per guest. The entire Ryan family was thrilled seeing Brett's apparent transformation: a prestigious job, a fancy apartment, and an attractive bride. However, the truth of Brett's deceit was far more complex. With the wedding just a month away, Brett needed funds for the event. He repeatedly borrowed money from his mother until she could no longer assist him financially. Desperate, he even demanded that she seek higher-paying employment. Planning his party for August, he invited all his friends and brothers. As the pressure mounted, confided in his counselor about his deceptions. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer at a technology company. The psychologist expressed deep disappointment and advised Brett to come clean to his mother. Though reluctant, eventually told his mother the truth. Her devastation was profound. She had spent years boasting about her wonderful son. She insisted that Brett also confess everything to Kristen, or she would do it herself. His brothers were already aware of the lies and supported their mother's stance. Unable to face telling Kristen the truth himself, a shocking task after barely managing to reveal it to his mother, Brett found himself in an untenable position as the wedding approached. He knew that informing Kristen would prevent the ceremony and considered if honesty might have been better. Facing pressure from all sides, Brett still couldn't admit the truth to Kristen and feared his mother might do so before long. Each time Kristen's phone rang, he tensed up until realizing it was not her discovering the secret, but rather another friend discussing wedding plans. Desperate for resolution and unable to handle the mounting stress any longer, he needed a final solution. He was forbidden to use firearms, so the boy decided that the best way to carry out his plan was to use a crossbow. Besides, it's quite a silent murder weapon. One of his late father's hobbies was bow shooting in the at-targets. He taught Brett how to, was good at target shooting, though it was unlikely his late father thought his son would that skill in such manner. Brett bought crossbow and arrows at a sporting goods store and hid it behind the construction debris lying in Susan's garage. At home, he arranged what he thought was an ingenious alibi invention. He tied a spoon to a fan and set the fan on a timer. When the timer went off, the fan turned on and the spoon moved across the computer keyboard, sending pre-prepared comments to YouTube. From an outsider's perspective, it must have seemed like Brett had spent all day at home watching videos and commenting on them. On the morning of August 25th, Brett, dressed in strange clothes that hid his face, left the house through the back door to avoid security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. His aim was to eliminate anyone who might disrupt his and Kristen's well-being once and for all. Susan was very surprised at her son's unexpected arrival. She had not been feeling well that day, but Brett, despite his mother's condition, began once again to persuade her, and even demand, that she not tell his future wife anything. The mother categorically refused him. Then Brett began to get angry. Susan sensed something wrong seeing her son's mad eyes, and warned him that she had already called Christopher, and he was on his way. Brett went berserk. He ran to the garage to get a crossbow, but found that his anger and adrenaline overflowed him with such force that he couldn't even make a shot. Instead, he bludgeoned his mother with the butt of the gun, and finally ensured she was dead by tightening a rope around her neck. After throwing plastic bags over the body, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows and hid in the bushes, waiting for his brother to arrive. After a while, Christopher arrived and started calling for their mother or brother, but received no response. Only an arrow shot from behind which pierced his neck, causing him to die within minutes. The next victim was Alexander, their youngest brother. As it turns out, Susan had managed to call him too before everything happened. He was also shot in the neck, but either the arrow did not penetrate deeply or it missed vital arteries. Thus, Alexander did not die immediately, but began to scream and call for help. During this time, Leland was in the house, sleeping in his room on the 2nd. He had no idea of the carnage occurring in the garage and garden, much less that his own brother was committing the crime. Leland's sleep was disturbed by a scream. Coming downstairs, he saw Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett. As soon as Leland gained the upper hand and managed to push Brett aside, he ran to the neighbors and called the police. Brett stayed in the house. He had nowhere to run. He realized this was the moment he had completely ruined his life. With nothing else to do, he took out his phone and wrote Kristen a letter asking her to forgive him. When the police arrived at the crime scene, they saw a bloody Brett sitting next to his equally bloody but still alive brother Alexander, who would later die in the hospital. Brett himself asked the policeman to handcuff him and take him to the station where he confessed everything. Brett also informed them that his mother's body was hidden under packages in the garage, but it was impossible to help her. At both the police station and later at trial, Brett admitted that he did not intend to kill Susan. His plan was merely to scare her. However, he did plan to kill Christopher and Alexander that day since they were witnesses. And if they hadn't arrived, they would still be alive. Almost 10 years ago, he tried justifying everything with his depressive state, but it did not soften his sentence. Despite acknowledging that Brett confessed everything on his own accord and did not hinder the investigation in any way, the judge sentenced him to 3 life terms, 1 for each murder, with parole eligibility in 2041. As for Leland, he is not speaking to reporters, but is known throughout Toronto as the sole survivor of that dreadful incident. In 1974, Siobhan McGinnis was a spunky 5-year-old girl with a beautiful smile who was never shy to show it off. Sadly, her life would be violently taken, and it would take 46 years to identify the monster that took her life. On February 5th of 1974, she was walking home from a friend's house in Missoula, Montana, when she suddenly vanished. 2 days later, her body was found in a snow-covered ditch near the exit for Tara on I-90, 10 miles from her home. She had been sexually assaulted and sustained trauma to her head and had also been stabbed. In the 70s and early 80s, Missoula was the stomping ground for serial killer Wayne Nance. Many believed he was the killer, but DNA would later rule him out. With no other leads, her case would go cold for decades. After 46 years, in October of 2020, detectives from the Missoula Police Department and others had finally identified the man who took her life. With the DNA left behind at the crime scene, specialists at the private technology company, Othram Incorporated, were able to create a genealogical profile of the suspect after a relative of the individual submitted a DNA sample using a home kit. This is how they would find Richard William Davis. Davis was 32 years old when he was traveling through the area at the time of Chavin's murder. He had no criminal record and was described as a family man. However, he never enjoyed the outdoors and loved caring for animals. He left behind a wife and 4 daughters. Davis moved around a lot and lived in Arkansas at the time of his death in 2012 at the age of 70. He traveled cross-country from New York to Alaska, but primarily resided in Pennsylvania, South Dakota, New York, and Arkansas. He was also linked to the 1973 attempted kidnapping of an 8-year-old girl in Bath, New York. Authorities said they don't know why Davis was in Missoula, but were able to locate the car that matched the vehicle witnesses said they had seen him driving back in 1974. Chabin's father, Stephen McGinnis, and her half-sister, Una McGinnis, were amazed and relieved when the announcement was made. They said the killer's family members were very, very kind people. Una said, her father said he always believed the killer was a random person and not connected to the family. Davis held various jobs, which included working as a missionary on the Sioux Reservation in the early 1960s. He also worked in the mines in South Dakota in the late 1960s as a security guard at a wine bar in Bath, New York in the mid-70s, driving a school bus in Alaska in late 1974 to early 1975. As a security guard at the Arkansas School for the Deaf and Blind in the 1970s or 1980s, and as a truck driver in the early 2000s. Davis also volunteered at Big Brothers Big Sisters in Arkansas in the late 1970s or 1980s. He drove multiple vehicles, including a Nash Rambler driven in late 1960s, an Oldsmobile 98 driven in early 1970s, a blue pickup truck driven in late 1970s to 1980s, and a truck with a sleeper cab driven in early 2000s. He also had 3 aliases: Dick, Nash, and William Davis. Investigators are still looking for similar cases Davis may be responsible for. In 1972, Julie Ann Hansen was 15 years old and a member of the band at Naperville North High School in Naperville, Illinois. She taught Sunday school and sang in the school choir. On July 7, 1972, she borrowed her brother's bicycle to ride to a baseball game. When she didn't return home, her family reported her missing. Police and local volunteers began searching for her, and soon discovered the abandoned bicycle on a gravel road near Knock Knolls Road. Sadly, the next day, her body was found in a cornfield just off Motif Road and 87th Street. She had been sexually assaulted and stabbed multiple times. Over the next 49 years, several persons of interest would come and go as they were slowly ruled out. In December of 1996, Major Morris was being considered a suspect in her murder because he had murdered 16-year-old Bobby Jean Anderson in 1973, the same way that Julie was murdered. Morris was a teenager working as a trash collector at the time of the murder and suspiciously moved just days after Bobby's body was found. He was arrested 23 years later and confessed to the killing. However, he was never charged in the murder of Julie Hansen. In 1978, Margaret Stern went missing after attempting to hitchhike home from work. Morris was later charged with her murder, to which he would later confess. The bodies of both his victims were found near the location that Julie's body was discovered in 1972. But Morris was not Julie's killer. American serial killer Bruce Lindahl was also ruled out as a suspect in 2020. He murdered a 16-year-old girl in DuPage County in 1976 and had been a suspect in a dozen other murders committed in the 70s and 80s. He died in 1981 when he accidentally stabbed himself in the thigh while stabbing a teenage boy to death in his apartment. His injury was fatal and it quickly bled to death. He was active at the time of Julie's murder, lived in Illinois, and had a similar MO. His DNA was tested against that found at Julie's crime scene, but he was not a match, officially ruling him out as her killer. In June of 2021, 49 years after Julie was killed, a retired welder, Barry Lee Welpley, was identified and charged with the murder of Julie Hansen. At the time of the murder, he was in his late 20s and lived less than a mile from Julie. Genetic genealogy was the key to solving the case. One of his relatives used a commercial DNA service to explore their family history, which helped link him to a small sample of DNA from the crime scene. Detectives built up a family tree that eventually led them to Wellfleet, who has pleaded not guilty. He was held in Ramsey County Jail on a $10 million bond and then extradited to Illinois to stand trial for first-degree murder. Julie's parents are no longer alive, but her brother and sister expressed their gratitude in a written statement. The case of Karina Vetrano. The story of Karina Vetrano is both horrifying and baffling. Firstly, nothing seemed to miss on the day of the fateful event. The attack occurred in broad daylight in a fairly populated area. Secondly, her death has critical aspects to it. Thirdly, the investigation and sentencing of the perpetrator raised many questions. On Tuesday, August 2, 2016, Karina arranged to meet her father after work to spend time together. Since Miss Vetrano had moved away, family gatherings had become rare because everyone was busy with their own matters. In addition to her commitments, she was balancing 2 jobs. Philip picked up his daughter and took her home. There, the family shared their impressions of the past week. When Karina was about to leave, she asked if her father wanted to go jogging with her, as they often did, covering several miles together. Her father replied that he couldn't this time, due to severe back pain that nothing seemed to alleviate. Perhaps he needed a new prescription, or maybe it was just the change in weather. Mr. Vetrano offered to call a cab for Karina due to his discomfort and inability to join her run. However, the weather was beautiful, the heat had abated, and there was a fresh scent in the air, hence Karina declined his offer. She was training for the upcoming marathon. The young woman had recently broken up with her boyfriend and wanted to distract herself. A jog would clearly do her good. That evening was the last time her parents saw their youngest daughter. At 5:45 p.m., she left the house for a jog. Her first stop was Spring Creek Park, a cozy and tranquil place buried in greenery, a true paradise amongst the city's infrastructure. However, only part of the park was available for walking. The rest was covered with thickets and swamps. Mr. Vetrano asked his daughter to stick to her usual route and stay away from unfamiliar paths and people. Unfortunately, Corina ignored his advice in search of solitude. She decided to go to a grassy, deserted place. Corina's thoughts were abruptly interrupted. She felt a sharp pain in the back of her head and fell down. This rash decision cost the young woman her life. A frightening uncertainty entered the Vetrano home. It had been 2 hours since they had said goodbye to their youngest daughter. She should have been home by now, or at least answering the calls of her parents, who were frantically trying to reach her, and she had promised to keep her cell phone with herself. The anxiety was growing. Her father sensed that something was wrong and decided to seek help from his neighbor, the chief of the New York City Police Department. They were on good terms, and the high-ranking official knew that Philip would not make a fuss over nothing. After that, Corina Vetrano was reported missing. Police began searching for the young woman, combing the park area and surrounding streets. As a result, experienced canine units were brought in, since it is known the first 24 hours after the sorcery, the disappearance of a person are crucial. Law enforcement utilized all available resources before nightfall. At the same time, Mr. Vetrano, along with a group of volunteers, searched for his daughter on his own. He scoured the park from end to end, combing paths and wading through tall grass, all while making phone calls. As dusk fell, he noticed a light in the grass. As he approached, he recognized Corina's phone. Maybe she lost it and just didn't let them know? Philip approached, headed toward police officers, deciding to continue picking his way through the thicket, stepping into the grass. As he ventured further, Philip stumbled upon something soft, a partially undressed female body lying face down. When he turned it over, a familiar face stared back at him. A desperate scream escaped from his father's chest. It was Corina. She hadn't simply lost her phone as he had initially believed. His little girl didn't answer her phone because life had been cruelly taken from her. The crushing realization of what had transpired overwhelmed Mr. Vetrano. The police, hearing the screaming and yelling, quickly rushed to him. They dragged Philip away from his daughter's body, explaining that it was now a crime scene. They emphasized that anything in the vicinity could be considered evidence and implored him not to touch anything to prevent tampering. On the journey home, Mr. Vetrano was lost in thought, tormented by how to break the news of their daughter's death to his wife. Images of past memories flooded his mind. He recalled vividly how on July 12, 1986, in Queens, their second daughter was born. From an early age, Philip had been proud of Corina. She was obedient and well-mannered. He remembered taking her to school for the first time and how excellently she performed academically. Her strong educational foundation enabled her to earn advanced degrees. Corina graduated from St. John's University with a master's in speech pathology. She always dreamed of aiding children and worked tirelessly with autistic kids. Corina loved traveling and writing and had a passion for sports, especially running, an interest she shared with Philip, which brought them closer together. He recalled how closely he scrutinized her suitors out of paternal jealousy, eager for her to find true love and eventually establish a strong family like his own with Kathy. He hoped for wonderful grandchildren. The return journey felt endless. As they approached the house, Mr. Vetrano paused at the entrance and took a deep breath. Fortunately, he didn't need to explain anything to her. She understood everything from her husband's face. Kathy cried, approached her husband, and hugged him. Soon, Corina's relatives and friends learned of the incident. They struggled to recover from the shock. Believing in the sudden death of the young woman was hard, let alone its violent nature. Ms. Vetrano had been subjected to a brutal attack. This was the conclusion reached by investigators. At first glance, it was obvious that the woman had resisted. Even in death, her fists remained clenched. Bruises and abrasions were found on her once young and healthy body, and her athletic clothing was torn. The autopsy showed that the back of the victim's skull had been damaged by a blunt object, probably a stone. However, the cause of death was asphyxiation. A clear mark was visible on the woman's neck. The forensic examination also revealed the intimate nature of the crime violence. The experts' findings confirmed the police's initial suspicions. Earth and grass were found under the victim's fingernails, probably in an attempt to free herself from her attacker's grip and escape. Specialists examined her mouth and found teeth knocked out and cracked in places. She had clearly bitten to defend herself. Even the woman's neck was covered with numerous scratches. She was grabbing with her hands, trying to force her attacker to let go of her. Shortly after this tragedy, new information leaked to the media from Princeton, Massachusetts. Another jogger's body was found among tall grass. The woman had apparently also been out for a walk in a secluded place and suffered a similar fate. At first glance, these cases seemed identical, raising questions about another potential serial offender. In the United States, geneticists took charge of the case, tasked with comparing DNA samples collected from the crime scenes. Fortunately, unidentified samples were found on both victims. Contrary to police expectations, the analysis showed no connection between the crimes. It turned out that the DNA samples belonged to different individuals. It's well known that most lethal crimes are committed by someone close to the victim. Thus, police couldn't ignore any possibility. To this end, the victim's father provided his DNA since he was first to discover his daughter's body. Later on, all of her relatives also underwent a DNA test which yielded no matches. Detectives then decided to interview Corina's family and friends to find out if she had any enemies or ill wishes. It turned out there were none. She was respected and loved by everyone. Investigators developed a new theory. Someone acted on base motives upon meeting Corina in a secluded place and attacked her. Feeling stuck, they sought public help by offering a $10,000 reward for information leading to the perpetrator. The initiative received widespread response. Detectives explored some 250 leads, conducted 600 genetic tests, and compiled more than 1,700 reports, all to no avail. It seemed like the perpetrator hadn't committed crimes before, or at least hadn't been caught for them, complicating things further. On August 31, 2016, a utility worker approached the police station with significant information at the time of Ms. Vitrano's death. He found himself in a restricted area of the park one day. Suddenly, a man emerged from the bushes and took off running in a northerly direction. Because of his testimony, the New York Police Department created and distributed a sketch of the suspect in December 2016. However, they considered that the person shown in the sketch might have just been a passerby caught at the wrong place and time. Unfortunately, releasing this sketch didn't provide any new leads, and the investigation fell into another long stalemate. On December 4, 2016, the Federal Bureau of Investigation joined in to help solve Corina Vitrano's case. At first, they developed a psychological profile of the perpetrator. According to FBI experts, this individual was very familiar with the area, especially the park where everything occurred, suggesting he might live or continue to live nearby. Fearing capture now, he seems to avoid that area. It was evident he knew that the quiet and partially overgrown territory was perfect for hiding his actions. Based on this idea, police conducted screenings among local African American men. However, this didn't bring about any breakthroughs. Let's going to take a look about Chanel Lewis. Chanel Lewis' life didn't stand out much from other young African American individuals. He lived in one of Brooklyn's low-income housing complexes, approximately 4 or 5 miles from Spring Creek Park, was unemployed and living with his mother, 3 sisters, and their children. One detail setting him apart was his diagnosis of paranoid schizophrenia. Yet this did not stop him from graduating from a private school for students with emotional and behavioral issues. Former classmates remembered Chanel as a quiet loner, who constantly faced bullying. One shared that even girls intimidated and punched him. He had no friends. Another peer noted that while Lewis sometimes fought back, he wasn't effective at it and often got ridiculed for his clothing and appearance. Chanel always wore a hoodie and would smirk and walk away when things got tough, earning him the unfortunate nickname African Lizard. 17-year-old Danielle Munes, a fellow student, described Chanel as a bright student with good grades. He liked to show me funny videos on the bus. she recalled. "I never saw him being cruel." Some sources reported that the young man once claimed he wanted to harm all the girls during his time in middle school, even posing the question, "What happens if I bring a knife to school?" Dr. Edward Dana, the executive director of the school to which Chanel was transferred, commented on this. "We received no reports of threats in middle school. During his time at our school, he had no disciplinary sanctions. I never heard him make threatening statements towards other students." Nonetheless, Chanel was a troubled teenager who often experienced bullying. He dreamed of working in social services, aspiring to help those in distress. When conflicts arose at home, he would wander the streets frequently and visit the park. Lewis had several minor encounters with the police, 2 for violations in Spring Creek and 1 for urinating in public in May 2016. Another incident happened when a local merchant reported Lewis for loitering in his store with a crowbar. Responding officers checked Chanel's ID and released him as he had no prior incidents. However, this information was retained by the police and later played a crucial role in the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death. In February 2017, Detective John Russo, who was involved in the investigation, remembered something significant. He had repeatedly seen a young man in a hoodie wandering around the park. Russo even attempted to follow him once, intrigued by his behavior. The young man walked slowly and stopped for long periods in front of houses near the park, as if scouting them for potential burglaries. However, Rousseau lost sight of him when he contacted his colleagues by phone. Following a store owner's report of suspicious activity, a teenager matching Chanel's description came to the police's attention 2 months into the investigation. Detective Rousseau recalled this wanderer, thinking he might have seen or heard something relevant. Investigators then focused on Chanel Lewis. After Detective Rousseau took a closer look at his file, Chanel's peculiarities had raised their interest. The police began inquiries about him, questioning acquaintances and teachers. It emerged that he had allegedly expressed a desire to harm girls. This news stirred significant concern and suspicion. With no other leads, officers decided to focus on Lewis. It was discovered that during Karina's death, Chanel was not at home. After an argument with his family, he had gone to the park. Upon his return, his appearance was disheveled, his clothes torn, and he had visible bruises and abrasions. When his mother inquired about what had happened, Lewis claimed he had been attacked. His account matched the timeline with a witness's description of a man fleeing the park. Additionally, on August 3, 2016, Lewis's father, a former school principal, took him to the hospital for treatment of severe wounds, mostly cuts, and he also had an injured hand. The investigators reviewed the medical records from that day and found the story plausible. However, they noted similarities between events involving Chanel Lewis and Karina Vetrano. On February 4, 2017, Chanel was brought to the police station and voluntarily provided his DNA for analysis. Detectives wondered if a perpetrator would willingly do this. The interrogation began on the morning of February 5th. Lewis admitted that he was indeed in the park around 5 p.m. on August 2, 2016, but clarified he was walking on dirt paths, listening to music, not through thickets. He confessed to encountering a young woman jogging with her phone in her hand. When asked by detectives if something happened when he encountered her, nodded and quietly said yes. When I met a woman alone, he began again. I decided to follow her. When she passed by me, I grabbed her shoulders and threw her to the ground, then hit her face about 5 times so she couldn't scream. He recalled how his punches knocked out several of her teeth, injuring his own hand in the process, echoing details eerily consistent with earlier evidence they had gathered. He also mentioned that the struggle lasted about 5 minutes. Miss Vetrano fiercely resisted by biting. To avoid drawing attention, Lewis dragged her off the path into Tall, where he tried to undress and assault her. She was horrified, but kept resisting. Chanel then strangled her until he realized she was no longer alive. When asked if he knew the victim beforehand, he replied, I did not know her before this. It all happened by chance. The motive for the act was unexpected and bizarre. Loud music played by a neighborhood gang member for hours had triggered Chanel's hatred and uncontrollable aggression. These negative emotions were unleashed on the unfortunate woman. A strange reason indeed. Investigators, confusion faded when DNA comparison results matched perfectly. Microscopic traces found on the victim's body and phone belonged to Chanel. Consequently, the police and prosecutor concluded the case was solved and ready for court. However, the motive still seemed unlikely. It's possible Chanel had noticed Karina before, since he often went to that park. He might have seen her with her father, liked her, and decided to approach her. After being rejected, he became furious and attacked her, causing the situation to spiral out of control. This scenario would have been more understandable. On November 5, 2018, the trial against Chanel Lewis began. Despite his previous statements to authorities, Lewis pleaded not guilty, a stance echoed by his family denying his involvement in the crime. The prosecution charged Lewis with ending a life and sexual assault, facing him with a sentence ranging from 25 years to life imprisonment. The debate over Lewis's guilt not only unfolded in the courtroom, but also spilled over into the media. Lewis's defense team stirred things up by pointing out alleged legal violations during his arrest. Along with several news outlets, they claimed racial bias and discrimination. However, the judge dismissed these allegations as baseless, emphasizing that the investigation complied with legal standards. The prosecution presented tangible evidence and DNA analysis findings, while the defense argued that this evidence was insufficient and contaminated due to many people at the crime scene, including Karina's father, who discovered her body. Forensic biologist Linda Rossano stated that odds of the DNA belonging to someone other than Lewis were 1 in 6 trillion. The prosecutor also introduced Lewis's phone records, revealing his internet searches on second chances and forgiveness in Catholicism, which raised questions about what sin Chanel hoped to atone for. The release of Lewis's confession video sparked further controversy. His lawyers argued he was under immense pressure, leading to a coerced confession. They suspected police might have fabricated evidence. The recording commenced only after Lewis was pressured, raising concerns that the search of his home violated protocols. The defense suggested that the investigation into Karina Vetrano's death was initially mishandled. With public pressure mounting for an arrest, they argued Lewis became a scapegoat. The jury was deeply influenced by the defense's compelling arguments. After considering both sides, jurors could not reach a conclusive verdict. On November 21, 2018, the judge declared a mistrial. A retrial was initially scheduled for January 22, 2019, but later postponed to March 2019. Following 5 hours of deliberation during the retrial, Chanel Lewis was ultimately found guilty of Karina Vetrano's death and sentenced to life without parole on July 23, 2019. The defense employed delay tactics by citing an anonymous source to allege misconduct by a juror, suggesting jury pressure and conspiracy. A case that seemed straightforward at first sparked widespread prejudices and fears in society. Karina Vetrano's tragic death affected many, serving as a stark reminder for women to remain vigilant about their safety. Thank you for joining us on this journey into the depths of unsolved mysteries. Cold cases not only challenge our understanding of the past, but also ignite our curiosity and determination for answers. Remember to subscribe to stay updated on our latest investigations. And if you have any information regarding the cases we've covered, don't hesitate to reach out. Together, we can shed light on the shadows of the past and bring closure to those who seek it. Until next time, stay vigilant, stay curious, and never stop seeking the truth.